Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really excited about our presentation today. I am Shelley Duncan, the Executive Director of the Kansas Business Group on Health, and we are a nonprofit organization affiliated with the Medical Society of Sedgwick County. We support local employers in improving the value of their healthcare benefits through quality improvement and cost reduction efforts. So if you are interested in learning more about the Kansas Business Group on Health, please let us know. We have regular webinars like this one, and I would encourage you to go to our website and check it out. We will be having our we have 2 annual conferences a year, and we'll be having actually the second one of the year in July, our Healthcare Roundtable, and I would encourage you to check that out. We have bi-monthly HR forums that are open for our members, and those are free of charge. And if you are a member, we encourage you to attend. And I think today's presentation will be really interesting and very informative for many employers. And I will go ahead and introduce Al Lewis, who is our speaker. And some of you may have heard Al. He was at our first, the Kansas Business Group on Health when it came under the Medical Society. And our first roundtable, Al spoke at that. So I will introduce Al and turn it over to him. Al Lewis is CEO of Quizify, which, by the way, we do offer through the Kansas Business Group on Health. That is in collaboration with doctors at Harvard Medical School, teaches employees health literacy using a format best described as Jeopardy meets health education meets Comedy Central. Prior to Quizify, Al Lewis' specialty was measuring wellness outcomes. 2 of his outcome measurement books have been trade bestsellers, and one was named Healthcare Book of the Year in Forbes. Because he measures outcomes validly, he has been called the wellness industry's troublemaker in chief. You gotta love that. And that's by his supporters. What his detractors say can't be repeated in a family forum such as this one. Before getting into wellness in the 90s, he was a partner at Bain & Company. He graduated with distinction Phi Beta Kappa from Harvard, where he also taught economics. He also graduated from Harvard Law School, but his only distinction there was winning the annual trivia contest, which I kind of think that's probably not true. I'm sure he would have many more distinctions. Anyway, thank you, Al, for being with us today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Shelley and Matt. And I see that the gates are open and people are coming in, so we'll jump right in. Just a little disclaimer, you've probably seen these disclaimers before. This webinar does not constitute legal advice, yada, yada, yada. The best legal advice I can give you is to review this with a real attorney. And now let's set the stage. Now we're gonna do some polling questions here, okay? Now they say you shouldn't use a recipe on company until you've done it yourself. And so this is, I think, the first time that we've all collectively done this, but I think we can probably pull it off. So we have a 4-question poll here. And the questions are you involved now with conventional wellness screening, coaching, HRA programs? Your choices are: we are doing one and showing good results, we're doing one and not satisfied, we are not doing one but considering implementation, or we are not doing one. What I'm going to ask for down the road is for people to, and I'm going to put my text message will be up with my phone number in it, to send questions and chat, and we can handle those while we're doing the polls, so it's not dead. And I just filled a little bit of time. So Matt, let's see what people have said. Okay, so you're doing one and showing good results. Seems to have won with 41%. And if you're showing good results from it, more power to you. We're not here to critique them, but rather to show you how to make them compliant. Or oops, I don't know what that beep meant. I think, oh, there we go. So the agenda we're going to cover is that there are proposed EEOC rules came out about 5 months ago, and they're already dead, which means what the governing law is now. And that's the first thing we'll do. And then we'll talk, we'll go through the rest of the agenda. Now, if you have questions, I'm going to ask that you send them to the phone number that you see, and it's going to repeat. The phone number is going to repeat at the bottom of the slides. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to present and also be checking the chat box at the same time. I mean, it's doable, but it's, you would notice that I was looking distracted. Okay, so the rules that used to protect employers are dead. And the dead that started, there was a legal decision that got made more than 3 years ago now that said that the original safe harbor that essentially allowed employers to do whatever they wanted under the context of voluntary clinical wellness programs under the Americans with Disabilities Act, as interpreted by the EEOC, they basically were defining voluntary and involuntary the same way. So a judge said that those rules were not apply anymore, and that the EEOC had to come up with new rules by 2019 to implement in 2020. Well, they came up with the new rules in 2021, and the rules were compatible with the decision that voluntary programs had to be voluntary, but they included a large loophole for outcomes-based programs, which are the ones, well, you either lose weight or else kind of thing. Those programs, they've kind of fallen out of favor, justifiably, but they are preferred by the U.S. Chamber and the Business Roundtable. The rules were not published in the Federal Register for comment, which is almost universally proposed rules are published. And so that was a warning flag. And then when the administration changed, they froze all the rulemaking, but they also, most importantly for the topic of future rules, you can't just, when a new administration comes in, you can't just change the makeup of the EEOC. You can't just throw some people out and bring some people in. But they took the Trump appointees and demoted them, and they promoted the Obama appointees. So it's the same people. It's the same people that you had before. But those of you who remember The Office know that you can have the same people, but if you change the reporting structure so that whereas the temp used to report to Michael G. Scott, then Michael G. Scott started reporting to the temp, it changes the whole dynamic. So suddenly you have people in charge who are all about protecting employees as opposed to people who are all about the business environment who got demoted. So that means that the 30% safe harbor is dead. The incentives that are compliant, this particular term is de minimis, and this includes all wellness programs that are clinical. All clinical wellness programs are out of compliance if they have significant incentives or penalties, period. So people will say to me all the time, well, until the new rules, doesn't that mean the old rules are in effect? No, the old rules are dead. The exact, and I'm going to say this like 2 or 3 times during the presentation because I always get the questions on this. The exact language of the Americans with Disabilities Act applies where the words are voluntary and involuntary until they are interpreted by the court. Now, the reason this happened was that that 30% defining quote unquote voluntary as a 30% penalty or skinning down the program and then giving a 30% incentive was not voluntary. The Business Roundtable and the U.S. Chamber went way too far in this. And as you can see from these headlines, they just, I mean, it was kind of flattering when you're in the wellness industry to know that wellness is this big a deal. They basically threatened to withdraw their support for ACA over wellness. Now, what happened was they overplayed their hand, and there is an expression, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered, and that's exactly what happened. If they had, if they had said, keep it at 10% or we don't mind 10% or something like that, they would have been perfectly fine. So once again, I'm going to say it again, the old rules are dead. There is no safe harbor. The words voluntary and involuntary as written in the ADA apply. So technically anybody can get sued, but only one person has, or one group has, which is Yale University. And the reason they got sued was in the analogy I give, and which is why you have, some of you will probably recognize the, in fact, I'll tell you what, anybody who remembers the name of the Jackie Gleason character in Smokey and the Bandit and sends it to me at well, you probably didn't write down the 781-856-3962 number, I'll give some kind of nice thing to. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be a nice thing. The reason I put this up is because if the speed limit is 75 and everyone's going 75, obviously everyone's fine. If they reduce the speed limit to 65 and everyone is still going 75, that's fine too. So that when the rules originally got called out, it essentially was like reducing the speed limit. No one paid any attention and everybody was fine, because you're not going to single out people for going 75 if everyone's going 75. Yale went 85 in the 65 zone. They went way overboard with penalties of $800 or $900 a year. It might have even been a little bit more than that, which is just way too much. I mean, if you have that level penalty, you are exposed. It is a time bomb. And let me just tell you about what Yale did. It was participation based. It was not outcomes based. So people say, oh, well, we have a participation based program, so it's fine. No, the EEOC, the lack of rules applies to both types of programs. It's no longer a sort of a bimodal thing. It was about $1,000. It was hourly workers. They did have a union. Which was big in terms of being able to sue. The coaches did some wacky things, and you probably, if you have wellness programs with forced coaching in them, I can guarantee you that there are some coaches who are, taking advantage of the fact that they, can say whatever they want. I mean, there was somebody who was told if they didn't get a mammogram, they were going to, have to pay the penalty. And they said, well, I had breast cancer, I had double mastectomy, and the coach said, nope, you still have to get a mammogram, which of course is crazy. But and that's just a one example of what these folks did. So the AARP joined with the unions to sue, and they created this test case, and the judge has been sitting on it, and we suspect that there's going to be a decision in 2021. Unless they settle, it will go in favor of the plaintiffs, and we will guarantee that. Like if somebody signs up for Quizify and we're wrong, we're going to give them like 30% back or something, because when we guarantee something, it stays guaranteed. So expect that there will be a decision for the plaintiffs, for the employees, which will trigger the sharks in the plaintiff bar to try to do other lawsuits. Okay, so no one really wants to go first. I mean, the AARP hates wellness because it discriminates against older people, because it's harder for them to lose weight, harder for them to have their blood pressure go down. So they were willing to basically fund this one. But there are going to be plenty of attorneys who are going to be willing to do this on a contingent fee basis. So having said that, I would say that successful EEOC lawsuits are rare, because there, as some of you know who've dealt with the EEOC, there's some administrative steps that have to be taken first. There's an administrative hearing, and that's usually the end of it. You might lose and have to give some non-compliant employee back their penalty or something like that. And it's a little expensive, but it's not the Yale situation. But if it happens to one person, you're probably going to have to change your whole program, because you don't know that employee is not going to tell everybody, right? And suddenly make non-participants whole, and then your program is going to go down the drain. Now, if you really are going 85 in a 65 zone, you do run the risk of a lawsuit. But mostly it's just a question of being in compliance or not. In the HR benefits field, everybody wants to be in compliance. And if you're not in compliance with this and somebody mentions it, it's going to be a little embarrassing. So this is an existential lemon for wellness, because as those of you who do the programs know, employees will not do screening or health risk assessments unless you either pay them a lot of money, or fine them if they don't, or give them access to a better health plan if they do, or something like that. There are very, very few employees who are out there saying, I would love it if my employer finds out all my blood values and everything. Now, of course, you don't personally, but they don't know that. They assume that you folks are doing all this stuff. So what you can do is you can create your own safe harbor to replace the safe harbor that is no longer. And the way you do that is you offer a choice of screening programs or activity-based programs, to achieve whatever points you have, because this is another critical point. So there's basically two things that you have to remember from this entire presentation. One is that the rules are dead and there is nothing protecting you. And the other thing is the EEOC only applies to clinical programs, not activity-based programs, which are totally an Affordable Care Act thing. The EEOC interprets the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's all about clinical exams and inquiries. So if you offer this choice, you can maintain your entire program as is. You can maintain your entire program as is for either participation or outcomes, because that would make them truly voluntary. That would make the clinical part voluntary. If you offer incentives for activity-based programs that equate to the incentives for clinical programs, so somebody can earn their entire incentive with activities, that makes the clinical part voluntary and therefore compliant. Now, this also gives you an opportunity to diversify from clinical programs, which by the way, the literature uniformly finds, I know a lot of people said they had good results, but the reason you have good results is that your vendor is only measuring on participants. They're not taking into account non-participants, which will offset the benefit to participants. So and it's also very expensive to do these things. So you can diversify into less expensive and less burdensome and more popular activity-based programs. So I'm going to use an example of a vendor. I know this is hard to read. You don't actually have to read it. I just been putting it up so you can see that it exists. Bravo offers a list of ways to get up to $500, some of which are activity-based and some of which are clinical-based. So, and you might say, wow, that's a lot of money, but keep in mind, and those of you who do these things know this, you're not just giving people $500. At some point years ago, you skinnied down the health plan and said people could earn the $500 back. So that's why, oh, I said there were two things you had to learn. There's a third. So if you remember the first two, there are no rules protecting you, no safe harbor. This only applies to clinical. And the third thing is that incentives and penalties are treated the same way by the law and by the courts. And the reason is that in the immortal words of the Undisputed Truth from 1972, a smile is just a frown turned upside down. Okay, so these large incentives are not employer largesse. They're the result of a skinny down program. So let's look at this. And now let's take it and make it readable, but also let's separate what Bravo did into the clinical and the non-clinical. Online coaching, clinical. Remember, you can earn up to $500. So online coaching, losing weight, completing your health risk assessment, submitting to a biometric screen, or I'm sorry, having a low BMI or a decent BMI, or losing weight or reducing your blood pressure, all those things, if you can just do some of them, you can get to the 500. Now, there are two clinical activities on the list: lunch and learns, and claiming that you don't smoke or attending smoking cessation. Now, I noticed I did not say not smoking. I said claiming that you don't smoke, because if you actually use a cotinine or a nicotine test, those are actually considered clinical, not non-clinical, whereas asking somebody if they smoke is considered non-clinical. So these two activities, the non-clinical ones, only add up to $350. Therefore, the program is out of compliance because you cannot get to the $500 without doing something in the red. Well, how do you fix that? One way is you could, instead of offering 4 lunch and learns, you could offer 10 lunch and learns, and that gets you to 250. 250 plus 250 equals 500. It doesn't matter if somebody doesn't want to attend 10 lunch and learns. I mean, who would? There's only a certain number of ways you can cook broccoli, right? So I don't know what you would do in 10 lunch and learns about wellness topics. The point is that there's the option for employees to do that, and that makes the entire program compliant. Oh, and finally, the text number is showing up on these slides. I put it down, in PowerPoint, you can put down the footer show up on every slide. For some reason, I put that, but this is like only the second or third time it's shown up. This is the number to send the questions to. Now, this is a great place to put in the 60-second Quizify shameless plug. Quizify was actually specifically designed, purpose designed to create EEOC compliance for wellness programs, because we thought that the voluntary rules were going to change after the election, and suddenly the rules weren't going to be employer friendly anymore. And you might say, wow, that was prescient. You really thought that was going to happen? No, we thought it was going to be the 2016 election where it was going to happen. So, but we're finally right. If you wait long enough, you become right. So this is a one-page item that could make your entire program compliant without changing any of your incentives, losing any of your screening, coaching, nothing that you have to change. And what you do is you give people the choice of screenings or weigh-ins versus playing these Quizify games that I'll describe in a little while. And I'm going to put my reading glasses on here. But if you notice, the word choice appears right at the top, and it also appears down at the bottom. Which one will I choose? So the words choice and choose between the clinical screening and playing healthcare trivia games is what makes the whole program compliant. Now, we tend to recommend screening for people who need screening, but probably 2/3 of your employees, don't need it, and probably half the remaining third aren't going to do anything about it anyway. So you really just want the people to get screened for whom it's going to be a benefit. Now, you don't have to take our word for this, because in fact, Quizify will indemnify. We make you compliant, and we basically promise that you become compliant. I'm not going to read the indemnification, just know that it's indemnified. So just by way of background, what is Quizify? And then I'll give you an example. As I think it was Matt or Shelley or somebody mentioned, Shelley mentioned that it's Jeopardy meets Health Education meets Comedy Central. There's no personal health information, and that's what makes it EEOC compatible. We do carry the Harvard Medical School logo on the questions. You can add health benefit questions, and much of it is the stuff that employees don't know. And as an example, rather than take my word for it, we're going to do another polling question. This time there's an actual right answer. What should you do if your kid has a cavity in a baby tooth? A, get it filled even though it will be very traumatic. B, ask the dentist to apply magic juice, paren SDF, to it. C, use general anesthesia so your child doesn't get traumatized, is unaware of what's happening. Or D, wait for the baby tooth to fall out. And while you're doing that, I think a question came in here. Oh yeah, so can you get Quizify through a wellness vendor? You can get Quizify through the business group. We do work with some wellness vendors. We are compatible with any wellness vendor. So Matt, do we have answers? Okay, wait for the baby tooth to fall out is incorrect. And that's a perfect example of what we talk about when we say that this is stuff employees don't know. It does actually happen that there is magic juice called SDF, which I believe was the answer that finished last. And if you go to the next page here, most cavities no longer have to be drilled and filled, and yet they are. And the reason is the dentist can charge much more money for drilling and filling than for simply, if you look down the yellow part here, the alternative is just to put a drop or two of the silver diamond fluoride using something called a microbrush on the decay, and boom, the decay stops, the cavity stops, and you're out of the office in 5 minutes for $30 with no drilling and no filling and no Novocaine. And you don't have to take our word for it. It's all over the media. It's been around for 7 years. There's some countries like Japan, if you go to, I'm not even sure the dentists know how to fill cavities anymore. They're almost always treated with silver diamond fluoride. It is magic juice. And yet, as we just showed, your employees don't know about it because you didn't know about it. So let's look at the rules and the exceptions for this the new normal that we're living in here, and how you apply these rules, or the lack of rules, I should say, to health risk assessments. So you have to make your health risk assessment non-clinical. to be compliant, unless, as we mentioned, you use activity-based programs, Quizify or whatever, so that people can get to this level without, get to the level of the incentive or the penalty without any of this stuff. But if the only thing you offer is risk assessments and screening, well, you're not compliant. But if you want to make your risk assessments compliant, you have to make them to avoid medical inquiries. The problem is that, number one, they won't be comparable to previous years. Number two, you can't do crosstab analysis because it's not going to tell you what people's risk scores are. People aren't going to know what their risk scores are. You wouldn't be able to learn from the vendor on a crosstab whether people who are obese are eating worse or exercising less. You basically lose the value of the health risk assessment. So here's what, here are four things that, that you could ask on a health risk assessment. And the question is going to be, which of these four would make this risk assessment clinical and hence subject the Americans with Disabilities Act and non-compliant? How often do you feel down in the dumps? Do you want information about diabetes? How much do you drink? Are you comfortable with your weight? So here comes the poll. And do we have any other questions here? No, I'm not seeing any other questions right this minute. So I can't fill the dead time particularly well. So answer the question quickly so I don't have to blabber on like this. So Matt, do we have an answer? Okay, the winning answer was how much do you drink? That is not considered clinical. The third place answer, tied for second place actually, was do you feel down, how often do you feel down in the dumps? That is considered clinical because that is asking people if they are depressed. Do you want information about diabetes is not the same thing as asking people if they have diabetes. And are you comfortable with your weight is not the same thing as saying how much do you weigh. So there are ways you can work around the health risk assessment, the ADA limitations. Now, I did actually put, these two were both tied actually. I did put light green around the diabetes question because they, there are attorneys you would talk to who would say, if you even mention diabetes, you're non-compliant. I disagree, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that there are people, if you consult a wellness attorney, and I'll be posting the names of a wellness attorney at the end here, you might get a different answer than I just gave. So down in the dumps sounds like depression. Clinical words like diabetes might seem like asking more disability-related questions, but I personally would be okay with it. Note you're not asking, do you have diabetes? Now, this is the most widely used health risk assessment. And I think you said that, I hope you said that Optum's not a sponsor, so I can use their name here. This is Optum's. Do you agree with this statement? Because remember, they tried to make it compliant. Do you agree with this statement? I am a good person and live a good life. Now, the problem with this statement is that most people, presumably all the people on this call, feel that they're good people and they're going to agree. Well, that's all well and good, except here's the problem, is that bad people are also going to say that they're good people and live a good life. Walter White is convinced he's doing the right thing here, right? So, whereas Jesse is just plain old bad. But they're still going to put down that they strongly agree. So you've just basically wasted your employees' time. They're probably scratching their heads why you're asking them these questions. So let's go through some examples of what's allowable and what's not. How many vegetables do you eat is allowed, not clinical. As we talked about, are you depressed, are you down in the dumps, is definitely clinical. We did the diabetes example already, but note there's a very clear difference between would you like information about diabetes and do you have diabetes? Would you like information about weight control, not are you obese or what do you weigh? So let's hit and by the way, Matt, I got to tell you, you're doing a great job with these polling questions. Let's hit the poll one more time. based on what you just saw, which is possibly not a clinical exam or inquiry? Coaching, checkups where you must share results, checkups where you have to just prove that you got one, or nicotine, cotinine testing. So which is not possibly not a clinical exam or inquiry? And while you're getting that, I have a question here, which is, do wellness programs really work, improve health outcomes, or save costs? The answer is, of course not. And I have a $3 million reward available to any wellness vendor that can show the opposite. I've laid out the rules on my website. I'll send you the link. The rules are very fair. And of course, no wellness vendor has done it, has tried to claim it. The Validation Institute just put out a 7-part series on measuring outcomes, and most of the wellness vendors out there are, in fact, are deliberately mismeasuring the outcomes. There's a saying, and there's an old joke about lawyers. How can you tell a lawyer is lying? And the answer is their lips move. Well, how can you tell a wellness vendor is lying about its return on investment? The answer is they're telling you there's a return on investment. So which do we think is not a clinical exam or inquiry? Okay, so it's kind of a tie between coaching and checkups, and in fact, those are definitely the two that are most best or better answers. But as between the two, I got to close the poll, advance the slide. Coaching is possibly not a clinical exam or inquiry. It depends on what you're coaching. Now, if you're coaching on, diet and exercise, you're fine. But if the coaching is about personal health questions, like what are you doing about your diabetes, suddenly you're out of compliance. So that's why the question was, which is possibly not a clinical exam or inquiry. Now, the other thing um, that was a very close second, or actually I think it was a little bit ahead, was the checkups. And there's a distinction between prove that you got a checkup, which is what the question was about, and have your doctor send in your numbers, which is clearly a violation. Okay, now, if you looked at the previous ones of these, you'd see that there was green and red, like green is okay, red's not okay. This one is yellow and red because, well, I personally would say you're perfectly fine just telling people, let us know you got a checkup. Other attorneys, or quote unquote real attorneys, practicing wellness attorneys, would say, no, that's not okay. So just want you to know you're in a gray area there. Have your doctor send you your numbers. By the way, it's a horrible thing to do to employees because it puts the doctor in a very awkward position where if they send in numbers that say that employees are gaining weight or high blood pressure, they're actually violating the Hippocratic Oath, okay, because they're harming their employees financially by doing that. So they either have to lie or violate the oath. So I would never have doctors send in numbers, and it drives a wedge. One of the things you try to do in wellness is create these physician-employee relationships, have employees get doctors. This drives a wedge right between those two people. It harms the relationship. It does not enhance the relationship. So here's a very clear difference. It's perfectly okay to have people do an exercise program and say, we'll give you money. Okay, that's an activity-based program. It's not okay to say, after you do the exercise, we'll take your pulse and then we'll give you money. So that's a very clear difference between the two. Now, this is a question I did not get it in here because for some reason the phone number is not showing up. Once again, it's 781-856-3962. And actually, to be honest, let me see if I can. Yeah, I can see the chat box a little bit here. I mean, if I have to put my glasses on, I have to put my glasses on. So one question I'm often asked is, are reward-driven crash dieting contests okay? Ironically, they are okay because they're not tied to the health insurance. The ADA and is really all about, or I'm sorry, the safe harbor is all about tying these clinical exams to health insurance. They just really carry different rewards. And the rewards are, oh my goodness, I interrupted myself. We have a winner. We have a winner, Keith Wygand. He said Buford T. Justice was the name of the Jackie Gleason character. So Keith, let's contact each other afterwards, and I'll give you some lovely parting gift. And then we have another. Actually, the text number is now quoted in the chat box. So if you can see it, it's 781-856-3962. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm trying to close the chat box here. And so you can still do these contests, but once again, just like with driving a wedge between the patient, the employee, and the doctor, we wouldn't recommend Biggest Loser contests because they're more likely to harm employees than benefit from them. And we're going to send this presentation. There's going to be a link to some quote unquote helpful online advice. And this is from an organization that's helping people cheat in Biggest Loser competitions, you know, which is, I mean, it's human nature to try to game a system like this. And even the people who cheat says it's a really bad idea to do these things. And then they will go on and tell you how you can use supplements and all sorts of things to gain an advantage of them. This is not what you want your employees doing. I don't know why that bell keeps going off. Now, another question we often get asked, which we did not get asked this time, is what about things that you might do specifically for like diabetes? You might cover their copays or use Livongo or somebody like that. Those are not affected, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, there's this concept called benign discrimination, where you are in fact discriminating in favor of diabetics, but nobody really cares. So it's considered benign. And typically that applies to health plans and not employers, but honestly, you're perfectly fine doing these things if you want. Now, whether they work or not is another question. Hint, they don't, but you're perfectly fine doing them. And the other reason they're fine is that you don't actually need a medical exam or inquiry to figure out who has diabetes. You just say we're going to cover the diabetes meds, and nobody who does not have diabetes is taking diabetes meds. So you don't have to know anything about the employees. So it's perfectly fine for you to do that. COVID vaccine incentives. There is no official EEOC policy yet. Okay, I mean, they've been going round and round. It takes the EEOC forever to do anything. One would think that they would have more urgency with COVID, but once again, I will personally, like for those of you who end up using Quizify, hint, hint, we will put 100% of our fee at risk, 100, that no legal or regulatory harm will come to any company that puts money up for employees to get these vaccines, even though there are clinical inquiries involved, like, are you allergic to such and such? You know, they ask you a couple of qualifying questions before they give you the vaccine. You are perfectly fine doing this as a matter of practice, even if there is no policy safe harbor for you. So we've talked a lot about the ADA, and the ADA is really what is at stake here. But I've made reference to the Affordable Care Act, and the Affordable Care Act is what allows you to put these 30% incentive or penalties up in the first place. So now, and this time, Matt, don't quite put it up yet because these are kind of long answers. So I'll ping you in a sec to put it up. As most of you are aware, the ACA has this reasonable alternative standard that if you, let's say you got pregnant or something, so you can't lose the weight, you can do something else. So how does the ACA's reasonable alternative standard fit in to this situation with the incentives? The one is if you offer a menu of activities that are non-clinical, you don't need to offer alternatives under the ACA. You still need to offer alternatives to employees who can't do the activities, but they can be clinical alternatives. So you can offer a clinical alternative to an activity. If the alternatives to the activities are clinical, they are subject to the ADA's voluntariness definition. So you can go ahead and put up the poll now in the short terms. And I'll just give people a second to read this. And see, I don't think we got any questions in here. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we did. The question about the $3 million reward. No, Virgin Pulse has emphatically declined the opportunity to claim this $3 million reward. Now, I will say that there is a $300,000 entry fee. Okay, so I'm not an idiot, right? And I want to make some money on this, but they have not claimed the reward. The way the judges work is I'm not the judge. I'm one of I have to prove that Virgin Pulse, or I have to prove the wellness vendor is wrong. They don't have to prove they're right. So the burden of proof is on me. The way the judges work is that we each get to appoint one. Two are appointed objectively according to who the most widely followed health economists are. And then those four get together and pick a fifth. So each of us only gets to appoint one of the five judges. So do we have an answer here, Matt? Okay, it's actually pretty close. And it looks like all of the above won the day. And in fact, it is all of the above. Because if your activities are non-clinical, you don't have to do anything. You're perfectly fine with the ADA. You're totally under the jurisdiction of the ACA. So you're completely okay. Now, if in fact your people can't do activities for whatever reason, you can actually offer clinical alternatives. So it's as long as somebody can get to the full amount with non-clinical things, you are in the clear. And if in fact you have clinical activities, if the alternatives to the activity are clinical, they still have to be voluntary. So you can't have like involuntary clinical activities. You can't have involuntary clinical activities. They can be involuntary. There can be, you can put up the incentive for more non-clinical activities, but you can't do clinical stuff. So just a few things here. It's okay to smoke, just this is by way of review, but no nicotine testing. It's okay to ask about use of alcohol, but not are you an alcoholic? It's actually okay to ask somebody if they use illegal drugs, and good luck. By the way, on any of these things, if you actually check how many people, if you have a health risk assessment and you ask people, do you smoke, do you drink, do you use illegal drugs? And then you compare the percentage who say they do to the actual percentages in Kansas, you're going to find they're nowhere near it. I mean, you're going to find that 3/4 of people are lying. 3/4 of people lie about how much they drink, they lie about how much they smoke, and they're certainly going to lie about illegal drug use. Don't take my word for it, just look at your own health risk assessments. So with these health risk assessments that ask these questions, you're trying to do wellness to create a quote unquote culture of health. You end up creating a culture of deceit. Employees just basically lie. You don't want them to do that. So to summarize, most existing health risk assessments are either unhelpful because they can't ask medical inquiries, or they are a medical inquiry. Most fitness-related activities are unaffected. Crash dieting contests says maybe I would say they are ineffective. Incentivized checkups, you're probably perfectly fine if you're just saying, did you go get a checkup? But I'm not going to tell you that. Someone else is going to have to tell you that. I'm telling you that attorneys would disagree. Value-based designs like the diabetes are unaffected. You need to watch what your coaches say. And it's difficult to do that because you're not able to control when they are. You're perfectly fine with COVID vaccines. And things that are compliant with the Affordable Care Act can be non-compliant with the ADA, and the EEOC is all about the ADA. So what we would say, if you, and about 40% of you said that you had not actually started a screening program yet, HRA, or you don't have one, but some of you are considering it. So just remember, if you're thinking about doing this, it's probably not a good time to do it because screening is non-compliant to begin with. You're going to, well, you're not going to have any HRAs to compare to anyway, but the non-clinical ones aren't going to tell you anything. And I'm listing all sorts of studies here that you can click through that shows that these old-fashioned wellness programs simply do not work, period. And the Validation Institute just did a 7-part series on how vendors will lie to you. So, if you have one now, do what you can to make it compliant. If you don't have one, not a good time to start. Actually, this one is a little bit, do we have time? Yeah, we got a little bit of time. So we put a couple of questions at the end in case we had time. So employees can sue. What are the things that discourage them? They need to jump through the EEOC hoops first. And this is which factor, so this is one factor. They could lose their jobs. The employee lawsuits on this particular topic of wellness have been unsuccessful in the past, and the EEOC won't support them. Let's see if I got any others on here. Nothing else came in, so we'll just ask for an answer. Matt? Okay, we have employee lawsuits have been unsuccessful in the past. That's actually true, but it's not what's going to discourage employees because the lawsuits in the past, every lawsuit about about wellness programs lost. But the difference was that when they lost, there was a safe harbor. There is no more safe harbor now. So those programs are not precedent anymore. The thing which is precedent is the decision in AARP v. EEOC that I referred to earlier about a judge, and I didn't say where it was, in the District of Columbia, that threw out these rules. That becomes the precedent. The things that happened before that are not the precedent. They could lose their jobs. Now, retaliation is a big thing in EEOC. So if they do get fired, they got another EEOC complaint. So they may not know that. They may think they can be fired. So that could discourage folks. But the real thing that discourages is, this is not an easy thing to do. They and their employees have to jump through their attorneys have to jump through EEOC hoops. And most attorneys aren't going to bother taking on an EEOC administrative thing, so the employee is going to be on their own, and they're kind of a pain. Now, if in fact they do find that your program is not compliant, the EEOC very well could support them if they have to take it to the next level and actually create a lawsuit, possibly a class action, like at Yale, involving all the employees. So to wrap up, do you, and the thing is, when we do these things at the end, these polling questions at the end, I of course have no idea how they're gonna turn out. So we're just rolling the dice here. Do you feel more current on wellness program compliance? And here's hoping that we're getting 75% here. Matt? Oh yes, score. Phew. Okay, because when you do these things on the web and you don't do them in person, you can't read your audience, right? And I didn't get a lot of questions, so it was it was hard to to tell, but it does sound like people liked it. And a few people did answer no. I would invite them to just contact me directly, and I'll either put them in touch with somebody else back here. I'll put them in touch with Barbara Zabawa, who is a wellness specific attorney. I believe the only one in the country, probably, written 2 books on wellness, and she can basically give you the deep dive beyond the the 50 or so minutes here. We'll people, when I put this slide up, people say, "Don't you mean Q&A?" I say, "No, this is Jeopardy. It's A and Q here." So we have a couple more minutes. If there are any other questions, you can put them in the chat box, because I don't have to be looking at the slides anymore. And
Al, I do have a question for
Sure.
you. This is Matt. We heard a presentation a couple of months ago from an employer who shared about their wellness program. And based on what you shared today, it sounds like some of their pieces wouldn't be compliant with the new rules. But I just wanted to go through some of their components. And can you tell me which ones would be in compliant and which ones
Sure.
wouldn't? I'll just give you a quick
Okay.
rundown of some of their components. So it was a self-described outcomes-based program. So
that essentially,
automatically
unless there's activities involved, that's going to throw the whole thing out, but keep going.
So the base or the most of their incentive can be earned through screening results, getting their screenings done. They have certain metrics that somebody has to achieve in order to earn their full incentive, and that's done by looking at the previous year's screening results and then comparing them to the current year's screening results. If their screening results don't hit the benchmarks that they need to earn their full incentive, they can still earn their incentive if they have a certain percentage of improvement over their last year's results. Spouses are incentivized to participate. There's a tobacco user surcharge, and the screenings are done by an in-house pharmacy program that they have.
All right. I will tell you with drop dead, take it to the bank certainty that is the single most non-compliant program I've ever heard of.
Okay, was there anything in there, the tobacco user surcharge, for example, or anything in there that you heard that was compliant, or was every single one of those things?
If the tobacco user surcharge is based on asking the question, you're perfectly fine. If it's based on a cotinine test, you're not fine. And once again, you don't take my word for any of this. I'm putting up the contact information for a quote unquote real attorney in this space if you want to go further here. But that is absolutely non-compliant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, I guess usually I'm getting deluged here, which is why I was concerned on that last polling question that I was losing my audience. But I think we're all set. So we will send the presentation, and Keith, if you want to get in touch with me, I'll figure out some very cool thing for you. And the presentation has live links. And my contact information is here, and the quote unquote real attorney contact information is there as well.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Al. I was just thinking again about Quizify and the statement Jeopardy meets health education meets Comedy Central. I think you all could agree that would be true with Quizify. And just to remind you too that you can get a 10% discount through our members can get a 10% discount through Quizify, the health literacy program that Al has. And so again, Al, I thank you so much for this presentation. Obviously, the majority of people learned a great deal today, so that's good. And would just remind folks again that if you are interested in learning more about the Kansas Business Group on Health, not only do we offer Quizify, but we do have other services that we offer at a discount that are proven to reduce costs. So I encourage you to reach out to myself or Matt or Dr. Justin Moore, who is our medical director. So with that, I will go ahead and end our presentation for today. Again, thank you, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Al.
Bye.
Bye.